Greetings, metaphysicians. This is episode 167, Divine Communication, Part 2. And in this episode, we are focusing on, you guessed it, the more divine aspects, the more unseen and eternal aspects of how we can communicate more divinely through our souls and through our divine teams, asking for their help. We also have an excellent bonus content, so tune into the episode and enjoy.
You're listening to Let's Get Metaphysical. This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed. It should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discernment, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn from this show.
Let's get meta.
Welcome to the Let's Get Metaphysical podcast. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci, here to remind you that you are a spiritual being having a temporary human experience here on lovely planet Earth. Make the most of it. This is Season 7, Heaven on Earth, and this is episode 167, Divine Communication, Part 2. And let's just jump right in, shall we? Let's get meta. Master Angels, I request your presence, guidance, and support through this episode. Please help these words to be useful to all listeners on their evolutionary journey. Let me know the truth, speak the truth, become the truth, and be the truth. And please let this episode reach whoever needs to hear it. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. Bless creation. So in the previous episode, Divine Communication Part 1, we mostly discussed human communication and how there is, in fact, more divine ways to communicate as a human, and how much of life, it seems, is us learning how to do that through various relationships, through work, family, just anything that we go through in this lifetime, and how there's not really a lot of guidance on how to communicate properly and effectively and appropriately and respectfully, all of these things, unless you really look for it. Of course, there's lots of resources if you look and you want to get better at communicating with other humans, but you kind of have to seek it out or live and learn. And this episode is more getting into the divine part, the more non-human aspect of communication, in the sense that we all have a divine part of ourselves. We all have our soul, and then we also have other divine beings as guides, as our support system, whether we're aware of them or not. And on and on and on, too, going up and up and up, all the way to the creator, the source, the universe, whatever you want to call that higher power. And of course, we can all communicate with that as well. But these are the non-physical, eternal beings, including, and I'm including in this, your soul, because your soul is the divine part of you. It is the eternal part of you. And when we can learn to allow our soul to speak through us, through our human body, the more we can do that, the more divine the communication. It makes sense, doesn't it? Similarly, there's people, and many of you might already have situations where you communicate with your guides, you communicate with your soul. They're distinct, they're different, but that communication probably sounds, feels, and is at a different vibration and level of consciousness than your human self, when your human self that's wrapped up in your ego and your personality and this body communicates with other humans. And I've had several examples, not just examples, just actually lived experience in these different ways of communicating over the last 10 or so years. Many of which I've spoken about on this podcast already, but part 2 is all about that. It's all about tapping into that more divine, less material, less physical part of you to use for the benefit of your earthly communication, to use for the benefit of your earthly connections in your lifetime as human, to use to better situations, ameliorate conflicts, to negotiate more positive outcomes. We all have that capability. So I guess the difference between these two parts is one where we can really do on a human level with human tools and human to human. And in this episode, we want to bring in that divine part of us. And ideally, we're using all the tools we can to be able to have these things happen, to better our lives through using this divine communication. And so a few examples of this from my own life, my own experience that I wanted to bring in is one of the ways that I have been doing this for at least 10 years now, I think longer maybe, we'll call it about 10 years, is this exercise called opposite hand writing. And the idea is that you write down questions or thoughts or greetings with your dominant hand, and then you switch hands and write whatever comes through you in response to whatever you asked with your dominant hand. And I've been using this tool for quite a bit, and pretty much from the very beginning, it was clear that what I was writing with my non-dominant hand was different in many ways. It was a different way of speaking, a different vibration and level of consciousness that was coming through. And over time, it could switch. It could be kind of from my higher self or my soul, that all-knowing part of me. What also has come through as our different non-physical beings, my guides, various angels, various ascended masters. But it's never me in my physical, egoic personality, human form, because what comes through is just different. It's clearer. There's no fluff. It's to the point. It's things that I would never have known to say. It brings forth information and guidance that I would not know in my human self or be able to tap into if I wasn't tapping into a more divine source. And I do this to this day. I still use this way to get information a lot of times. Another way I get this information is through meditation or through just asking and being quiet and hearing, feeling, or knowing the answer. And that has happened easily, more and more easily over time. And that's the feedback that I've received as well from others who practice these sorts of things, is that over time, if you keep doing this, you're honing a skill. It's like you learn a new sport, you're not great at it right away. You keep practicing at it, you get better and better. Same with a new language. And communicating with non-physical beings or the divine part of you is like using a different language on some level, and you do need to practice it. But I'm just offering a few different ways here in which you might begin to tap into that part of you. So this opposite hand writing, it's quite simple. It's what I explained. Write something with your dominant hand, switch hands with whatever you're using to write with, and just let it flow. Like literally, it can be word for word. You'll get one word in your head. You write that word, and by the end of that word, another word will come in your head, and you just write it. You have to let go of any judgment, try to let go of your thoughts, and just allow it. And your handwriting with that other hand does eventually get better, I will say that. It's still not as good as my dominant hand, but it is readable. And really only you need to learn how to read it. So that's good too. But that voice it's a way of turning off your thinking side of your brain that's connected to your personality. It doesn't really matter if you're right or left-handed, because I happen to be left-handed. And when I write with my right hand, it just is that soul part. It is that, or if it's a angel or a being or a ascended master, whatever is coming through, it's a higher level of consciousness than I am. And you can tell because it sounds different. And it says things that are brought through that I wouldn't have thought about. And that's kind of how it is with any other way too. So that's one way. I mentioned meditation. I mentioned asking questions and then just being silent and listening. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, different ways to know that you're being communicated with by your team, by your guides, by your higher power super friends, however you want to refer to them as, your soul group, even on these non-physical levels. But I talk about it over and over again because it's part of what this show is here for. It is to remind us all that we are living a temporary human experience, but our deepest nature is divine. Our deepest nature is eternal. And when we remember that, life changes, it shifts, and you're better able to see the big picture of your life, see the big picture of life on this planet. Things that are going that would be very stressful maybe in your human understanding and conceptualization of any given situation become different because your perspective has changed. You have remembered that there's all this other reality to your existence. And so that is why we talk about stuff like this a lot on here, often. And those that get this message can stop listening to the podcast and move on that level, right? Because we all seek out different things, different channels, different podcasts, different sources of information and content that we need at that moment. But that's getting, I'm getting into something else now. But the point is, why is this useful? When we can remember to tap into those more divine parts of us and communicate with those, outcomes are better. They're more positive. They're more high consciousness. They help us to have a greater sense of awareness. All of these things are benefiting us and can benefit us more. And especially in times like now, times like this, where we are today, where there's still increasing amounts of polarization happening on this planet. I went into that a bit in this most recent episode, the previous episode, about how that's affected me personally recently in several different ways. But you all have your own experiences. You all have your own situations where this is happening in your lives. When we can tap in to that most or more divine part of us and bring through that level, that higher level of communication, it can move us through situations more effectively for everyone, for all outcomes. And I'm seeing this, as I mentioned before, very clearly in every aspect of my life right now. And I'm definitely not an expert at it. I'm hoping to become one. I think it would be beautiful to just know on a deep and higher level how to correctly and appropriately respond and articulate in any given situation, because there is a correct way. And that's something too. It's like we have literally limitless options for how to respond to something in any given situation. We can literally respond however you want. That's the beauty of language. It's the beauty of speech. We can choose anything to say or not say, right? But given the divine order of the universe and everything being what it is in any given situation, there is a divine and proper way to respond in any given situation. It's like how there's a key for every lock. There's always a way to better a situation through speech. In the beginning, there was the word, right? So communication is not only key and vital, it is what creates, what makes up this creation. It is a very building block, the word, of how we live in and enjoy this reality, whether it's Earth or any other reality, but the communication aspect. And so if we can, in our human bodies, become better at that, everything else becomes higher vibration, higher level of consciousness, greater sense of awareness. Everything flows more if we can connect those divine dots and find the verbal way through. And that is what this portion, this second part that I wanted to talk about is. So doing that and allowing that unseen divine peace, whether it is you and your own soul, that's great. If that's how you want to focus on and call in your highest divine self to answer through your human body, beautiful. If you want help from your guides on any level, that's great too. And I use both. And even in this podcast, every word that you're listening to, I say a little prayer, I make a prayer request before I speak, and then I do another one here with all of you listening, my initial prayer, right? At the top of every episode. And that is another recommendation I have for tapping into this divine communication, is asking for help. Ask them to speak through you, or ask your highest divine self, your soul, to come through and speak through you. It is the most difficult to do that if you're already in a reactive situation, if you're already in a confrontation somehow, or something that's uncomfortable, or any kind of conflict. If you're already there, it is difficult to stop yourself and do that in the moment, because we're already worked up in our human body with our human reactions and our human temper and our human blood thundering through our veins and our human hormones, right? And that's okay. All of that's what we need in this lifetime. But what I'm getting at here is you can make a request first thing in the morning. And part of my routine when I'm good at it, and sometimes I slip up and take time and whatever, but I notice the difference when I don't follow my routine. I'm just laughing because I'm getting back into a routine after having slacked a little bit recently, but that's okay. Part of my routine is saying certain requests every day. And I have added one recently in the last few months that's specifically about speech. And my guides helped to, in fact, the way that I composed this particular request is I asked with my dominant hand if they would help me compose a request to have more divine and perfect speech and communication. And then when I switched to my non-dominant hand, a request came through to help me with that. And now I say that as part of my daily requests every morning when I wake up. And so in this way, right? And this way, by asking for help from either your divine self or your divine teams, you can bring this in. And I could share my request with you. You can come up with your own words. The one that I'm using at the moment is to the effect of, Master Angels, I request you speak through me now, and let only the purest amount of light, love, and truth pass my lips in your service. Thank you, with gratitude and full faith. That's how it came out for me, and I've been using it to great effect. I notice it when I don't say it, when I forget to request that, because it's not ingrained yet. And it does help, just like asking requests of your guides and your angels does help. And this is what's coming up right now in the culture, in the world, in the energy of the planet. And that's why certain topics come out when they do. And this is the divine communication moment, for me at least, on this planet. And so now it is for any of you listening as well. This is the moment. This is a moment that you can decide to become better in your speech. And I may have mentioned this in the previous episode, but I'm going to mention it again here because it's so important. Your speech doesn't only have the ability to get you into better situations or worse situations, sometimes neutral. But in this case, we'll mention, like, you can get yourself into trouble with your speech, right? We all know that. We've all done it. I did it just as recently as yesterday, probably. So we do that. But what nobody really talks about sometimes is that your speech can get other people into trouble too. It can rile people. It can push people. It can help someone to make a choice that ends up being detrimental to them. And that's on you. That is your karma. Our karma comes out in our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And so if you're saying something, as I did in my example from the last episode, in which I said something just unnecessary, I didn't need to say it, and it ended up riling up my friends to think a certain thing about me, and that friendship may have ended because I said something without thinking about it that just didn't need to be said. And I have the karma for that. That is my fault on some level. I didn't know it. I didn't do it intentionally. I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't try to rile anything. But I still did that. And in these moments, in these sensitive times, it counts. It changes things. And I am seeing that so visibly right now and so loudly because I need to see it. I need to understand how powerful my words can be. Your words are just as, if not more powerful than my words as well, and they matter. And so not only can you get yourself into a mess with your speech, your words, your communication, you can get whoever you're communicating with into a better place or a worse place. And so what will your words do? What will your speech do? And that's what we get to start to become aware of. That's what I'm becoming painfully aware of, excruciatingly aware of. And it didn't just start happening now. I mean, if I'm being honest about this and I think about it, I mean, this started at least 2 years ago for me. And it's just becoming like they're turning up the volume. It's like my angels are turning up the volume whenever I say any little thing, any throwaway phrase that really I should just say in my head, if at all. Maybe I shouldn't even think it, right? Because the thoughts also have karma. So like, why stir the pot? Why poke the bear? Why throw stones when they don't need to be thrown, kind of thing? And I'm talking about pebbles. I'm talking about like little baby stones, but they still make a difference. If they're said unconsciously and you don't have awareness of what the energy that you're bringing to them is, that can cause damage. That's why we're talking about this right now. We want to be bridge builders. damage control. Put out fires, not start them. That's where I'm coming from. That is my goal right now. That's my divine goal. I want to be a bridge builder with my words, with my speech, and I'm not there yet. But the more that I'm able to perceive and be aware of where I have messed up in my speech, how I have created situations that have given not only me huge backlash, but the people that I was with, and changed the courses of my relationships with them, it is humbling. It's humbling to realize that you have caused this thing. If you can move past your ego, you can move past your personality and your self-righteousness and think that, well, I'm right, so it's okay what I said. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they're just sensitive or anything. Whatever excuses you're saying, you're still responsible. You're responsible for your speech. I'm responsible for my speech. And who knows what I've said over these past 7 years on this podcast too, right? Like, that's all out there. And that makes me nervous sometimes because I evolve every moment, just like all of you. I'm growing. And whatever I said 7 years ago, I'm not even the same person that I was then. And nor is anybody else, because we're all changing and evolving. Hopefully, that's the point, right? But that's where we get to really request help so that you can speak, communicate, and be more divine. Communicate more divinely, calmly. And, I've given you some examples on how to do this. Highly recommend making a request at the beginning of the day, not when you're already in an altercation, not when you're already in a conflict, at the beginning of the day, so that you have that energy and you have that support that you've asked for to speak more divinely, more purely, more from your soul, more from a higher level of consciousness. And flow through, be guided through, be divinely guided through the correct path, through your speech, through the word. Find the right way to be or not be. A lot of this is just going to be you not saying something where you normally would have. And that's what I'm finding. There's been so many times, there's been uncountable, innumerous times lately where something comes to mind that I almost say, and then I have more awareness of it. And I'm like, I don't need to say that. I just don't need to say it. It's not going to help the situation. Doesn't make it more positive. Doesn't make it more funny. Might make somebody feel uncomfortable. I'm just not going to say it. Boom. Done. And so there we are. I think the meat of this has already come out. I did want to say that for the bonus content for these last 2 episodes, what I'm going to do is make my most recent full moon event available to anyone on Patreon. Anyone who is a patron angel of this podcast on Patreon. So that is the bonus content. Let me tell you more about it. The reason I'm making it the bonus content is because we did a massive group healing and a lot of this topic came up. A lot about divine communication came up. So instead of doing another one, I'm just going to make that have access. Give everyone on the Patreon access to that, all the people who signed up for bonus content. And it's great. I highly recommend it. Listening to it. And if you're interested in that, you can go to patreon.com/letsgetmeta and sign up to be a patron angel, any tier, and you will have access to all bonus content. And depending on the tier, you could also have access to all of the full moon events that I've also done as well. And they're powerful. Not because it's me, it's because I kind of get out of the way and allow my soul and my team to come through. More powerful than I am in my human body, that's for sure. So thank you for listening as always. I hope that this is useful to all of you, to all of us right now, because can you imagine what the world would be like if we were all speaking through our soul selves instead of what's happening now? We all paused for a moment to become aware of what we're saying and what effect it could have, and what ripple effect that it could have. The world would change overnight. That would be cool. And I will continue to make prayer requests for that. But as always, thank you so much for listening. Stay positive, stay safe, and stay meta.
The Let's Get Metaphysical podcast is an Up, and Awaken production and is produced and hosted by Renata Maniaci. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. The Let's Get Meta podcast is inspired by angels and supported by angels. If you would like to be an angel donor to the podcast, visit patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.